Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I'm going to give you guys the top 10 tips on how to succeed in Arena. There's some pretty valuable ones. I think it covers most of the frequently asked questions I get in the comments and on my stream. And I think it should give you at least the roadmap to becoming a very good Arena player. And some of these tips certainly extend into other formats and even other games if you want. So, okay, here we go. The order of these tips is not the order of importance. It's not like a countdown. There's kind of a flow to them. There's a natural order that will kind of help you understand Arena through its different cycles and variables, let's say. So, first tip, how to be real good at Arena. Use Hearth Arena, or at the very least, a deck tracker. Arena is not a game where you always have the same deck. So it's very important that you know what's in your deck at all times. And yes, there's some controversy of deck trackers and their impact in competitive, constructed play and all that. Well, I can tell you in Arena, it matters a hell of a lot more than it does in constructed, because you're going to forget what's in your deck. And if you want to go the step up from just using a plain deck tracker when you play Arena, you can try Hearth Arena, which gives you the scores. If you're using the Overwolf app, at least, yeah, I know I'm sponsored by them, but I used it before I was sponsored, and you know how useful it is to have this. You get the scores on the cards when you are drafting. Now, you don't have to obey the scores, but they're a guide. You have to think of it this way. Hearth Arena is like your buddy in drafting, and your buddy's going to suggest things, and you're going to agree with some of those things, and you're going to disagree with some of those things. That's fine, but at the end of the day, you're going to have two opinions when you draft rather than one, and you're going to make a lot fewer mistakes when building the best deck that you can. Tip number 2, how do you build the best deck that you can? Well, you have to know which classes are really good, because the Arena draft happens on the class selection screen. Now, there are a few aspects to this. My way of finding out the class power rankings is going to Hearthstone Replay. They have an Arena section just on their front page there, and you can see the overall class win rates. Now, it's important to know that Arena is a game where good players win a lot more than they do in constructed even. Imagine this way. A lot of players get legend rank in constructed if they have about a 50% win rate. With a 51% win rate, you just play a lot. Bam, legend, there you go. With a 50% win rate in Arena, you're basically going to go 3 wins, which is not something people are typically very proud of. Maybe they should be, but it's not something they're typically very proud of. You wouldn't compare getting legend rank to getting 3-3 in Arena. It's not really comparable. It is apples and oranges in this case, but nonetheless, you understand what I'm saying. Consistency matters a lot in Arena, and it can be difficult to be consistent with the aggressive classes. So, yes, you want to know the class power levels. That is tip number 2, but you have to understand them as well. Classes like Hunter that are naturally built for aggro are going to have a very large variation of results, and even though they might be very good, you're not going to see them in the higher wins in Arena. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Tip number 3, be a master of a few classes, not a mediocre jack of all trades. There are 9 classes in the game. In Arena, you never have to play them all. If you want to be an optimal jack of all trades, you need to be a master of 7 classes, because you're never not going to see 7 classes. You get to pick from 3. And there's always going to be 2 classes that you never have to choose. And you can use the power levels of the different classes to make that decision at any given time in Arena. So let's say Shaman and Hunter are the absolute worst classes in the game. If you want to be good at Arena, you basically never play those. Yep, that's it. You don't even bother to learn how they work. However, on the high end, the classes that are very good, you should be at least playing them. Even if you don't like them, you should at least be playing them to understand how other people will be playing them. You have to be a master of Arena. You have to be master of some classes, but it's quite important to not be a master of all of them, because you'll actually not be quite as good. Tip number 4. Let the draft tell you what to play. You can fill in the gaps near the end, but it's very important that you take what you're given in Arena and you don't try to restructure it under some way that you like playing the class. For example, Mage is probably the biggest trap that people fall into because Mage is one of the most versatile classes in Arena. You can play an aggressive Mage. You can even play an aggro Mage with a burn, okay? You can play a tempo Mage. You can play some synergistic, maybe some, card generation, maybe some secret synergy. You can play like a synergy-based tempo Mage. You can play a control Mage. You can even play a fatigue Mage. Generally, mages that are very heavy have a lot of board clears, have a lot of taunts, and have a lot of card generation, so they don't have to use card draw to outvalue their opponent. All of these different Mage decks can be very powerful on their own, but a lot of people, when they start drafting Mage, they're like, well, I like Control Mage, so they just play Control Mage 100% of the time. So you're better off letting the draft give you the best option and taking that rather than warping it into what you think you should be doing with the class. Now, there's obviously some small exceptions, but in general, this is kind of a big deal that people overlook. So when you're drafting, just pick the best card in at least the first half of the draft. The first 15 cards in your deck, just pick the best card. Doesn't matter what's in your deck, pick the best card. Now, if you think a card might be better than, let's say, Hearthstone says it is, that's fine. If you think you're a better player with that card, you can make some exceptions, but don't pick for synergy. Don't pick to what you like to play. Don't fill in any gaps until at the very least the second half of the draft has begun. Let the deck do its thing for you. All right. Number 5. Understand that Arena is a game of gradual and incremental victory. So in Constructed, this is the part that's very different from Arena. In Constructed, you can just have aggro decks that blow your opponent out immediately, and the win condition is the early game. You can have mid-range decks that the win condition is some crazy combo. You can have combo decks that literally the only thing that they do is some crazy combo. So in Arena, there's none of that really. It's very rare that you have any kind of extreme synergy, extreme combo effect in Arena. Winning in Arena is about winning gradually. Having the better 1-drop, having the better 2-drop, having the better 3-drop. Once you understand that Arena is kind of like a growing, developing win condition, once you have that mindset as the games are unfolding, you'll understand better decisions and you'll understand when you need to take risks. Risks is the biggest thing in Arena because you're not dealing with a static deck. You're not dealing with a static win condition. Everything is dynamic. So you have to leverage the risk based on your position in the game. And that position in the game is one that is almost always going to be gradual, and that is one you always have to pay attention to. And it starts from the very opening sequence of the game. You hear me complaining about it a lot, how, hunters are so crazy going first and so crappy going second. That is still an incremental thing. Hunters start off going first in a pretty powerful position, and it's your responsibility to kind of leverage and take additional risks at the very start of the game to try to block that opening damage. You don't want their starting advantage to snowball because that's the only way you win an Arena, incrementally. Number 6, learn the Arena win ladder and take additional risks when necessary. So this is a fundamental concept in Arena that some people are still not aware of. When you're matching up against someone in Arena, it will first choose someone with identical win records. So if you have a fresh draft, you're at 0 wins, 0 losses. Nearly 100% of the time, you will be matched up against someone with exactly that win record. Now, when you're at like 8 wins, 0 losses, there's not going to be that many people queuing up for an Arena game at the same time as you are queuing up. So in the later stages, in the extreme stages, you will probably face someone with a slightly different Arena record. You might face someone who's like 7-2 or something like that. But if you're 8-0, you are never in a million years going to play someone who's at 0-0, okay? Arena has kind of like the ladder, the power level ladder, okay? And it's very important to understand this as as you get higher up in the wins in Arena, your opponents will be stronger and stronger. And if you are barely keeping up game after game, you have to take additional risks to have a chance to win. For example, if you have a slightly above average deck, you can play a pretty safe game without taking too many risks if you're a good player and win most games at 0-0. If you have a only slightly above average deck, at 8-0, you're probably going to lose most of the games if you play the safe game. You have to take those risks as you get higher and higher in Arena, because that's the only way you're going to win against some of the crazier decks out there. And trust me, the decks at the high wins in Arena are really crazy. They're as good as they get, literally. Number 7. Pay close attention to the cards that stay in your opponent's hand for a long time. This is kind of like an advanced level tip, but it is the difference between a good Arena player and a great Arena player. You'll often see, just through natural gameplay, a card or two sitting in your opponent's hand turn after turn after turn, and it's like turn 10, and you're like, man, what could those cards be? And, sometimes you're going to be at like 0-0, and those cards are going to be just, some absolute dumpster garbage that really was never very good to play at any point. That's pretty rare, and it's certainly very rare once you get to the higher win in Arena. But what it typically is extremely powerful situational cards that your opponent is trying to get the maximum value and tempo out of. You can take into account a card like Flame Strike, for example. A card like Flame Strike is often held in an opponent's hand for quite some time. So if your opponent is a mage, has had a card in their hand for a long period of time, you have to think how long that card has been in their hand and how good Flame Strike could have been since that card has been in their hand. And once you apply this thinking method to the possible options in their hand, you'll actually have a pretty narrow, you'll narrow it down quite a lot and understand what your opponent has in their hand a lot of the time. Often I'll be streaming Arena and my chat will just lose their minds on my incredible predictions. And basically it's this process. If you narrow it down, if you're really focused and you're really paying attention, you often can narrow it down to a card exactly. And then if you know your opponent has that, it's a huge deal to be able to play around it or bait it out when necessary. Tip number 8. Make greedy plays and don't draw when heading into fatigue. Once again, this might be a concept you might be familiar with in Constructed, but it is quite different in Arena because wins and losses, again, from tip number 5, are incremental, they are gradual. So you don't win all at once. So it's pretty important to try to be in the best position possible when you're heading to fatigue. If both players have 5 or 6 cards left in their deck, you can't just play a minion out every single turn. You might have to take, a good bit of extra damage to make sure that your 5 or 6 remaining cards overall produce more value than your opponent's 5 or 6 remaining cards. You'll find that once you get to higher wins in Arena, more people are playing control decks, and more of these control versus control matchups will go into fatigue, as typically the better players with the better decks are the ones at the higher win records, and they won't make mistakes to let those wins slip out of their hands. Fatigue games are actually relatively common in Arena at the high win records right now. Number 9, manage your results. In Arena, we often talk about how well everyone does. It's been a very interesting revelation through the leaderboards that Blizzard has produced every month. Best 30 consecutive Arena runs are posted. I've managed to get first place in the USA 3 times, more than anyone else in any region. I play a lot of Arena. I know my Arena. But still, you'll often see your friends talking about, you'll often see people on Reddit talking about it. It's died down a lot since there's leaderboards. People would be like, yeah, I get 9 wins average in Arena. Yeah, I get 8 wins average in Arena, and I don't even play Arena. This is all generally total bullshit. It's very difficult to do well in Arena. The best players every month, yeah, there's sometimes an outlier who gets like close to 9 wins, maybe even 8 wins. But typically, if you look at like 10th place in any region for a whole month of the best players in the game, they're barely over 7. And on some months, they're not even at 7-win average. Okay, so you have to understand Arena is a very difficult net zero game. If you win, someone else has to lose. The average player in Arena is getting 3 wins. But yeah, 3 wins doesn't sound like that great of a thing. But the thing with Arena is there's a lot of factors that you can use to improve your results. Largely the ones I've mentioned in this video. And once you get to like 4 wins, I believe, it's the same as if you were buying packs for 100 gold, because you get like on average about 50 gold plus the pack for your entry fee. And once you get to like 6 wins, it's quite good, because if you have a highly variable win rate, so for example, if you always get 6 wins, you're not going to go infinite off of just gold in Arena. But if you get the occasional 10, 11, 12 wins, and of course the occasional 1, 3, 0, 3, the high end of Arena is much more rewarding than the mid end in Arena. So it's very nice to try to get up there. And at the same time, you have to know, like, yours truly, Kripparrian, best in the USA Arena. I 0-3, like, I wouldn't say often, but it happens. I do go 0-3. I go 1-3 a lot. I go 2-3 a lot. I go 3-3 a lot. That's just how it happens. Trust me, I know I can get pretty salty when I get a really good deck and I get absolutely wrecked by RNG. But I still remind myself, that's what it is, man. It's Hearthstone. Best player in Hearthstone wins like 60-70% of the time. And sometimes those odds are not in your favor when you absolutely expect them to be. So really manage your results, manage your expectations of Arena. It's very important to becoming a better Arena player. And finally, tip number 10, probably the most important one, is to repeat all of the other steps a lot. And I mean a lot. In Arena, experience counts probably more than any other game mode. If you play Constructed, you can just be the master of one deck and its interaction with the other decks in the meta. And, that changes quite a bit. It's certainly something that changes more than Arena on average. But in Arena, you need experience. You need to know how people play. You need to know how people would hold cards. You need to know how the overall game works at any given time through the eyes of all the classes. Playing a lot, getting that experience is the single most important thing you can do. So get out there, enjoy Arena. It's pretty good right now, and it almost always is pretty damn good regardless of what's happening in Constructed. So check out the game mode. Hope I've been helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.